Hello everyone, my name is Kristina Cervantes, and today I'll be presenting my qualitative case study focused on special education teachers, specifically examining compassion fatigue and how it influences their career decisions. This is a critical issue in education, especially as we continue to see high attrition rates among special educators. I'll be walking you through the major components of this study. I'm going to start with the problem statement, then I'll be summarizing the literature review, followed by the purpose of the study and the three research questions, the theoretical framework, methodology, the four findings in the study, as well as integration with existing literature. Then I will discuss the implications and finally the distribution plan. The problem explored in the study is on special education teacher attrition. So teachers are leaving the profession at very alarming rate. For example, between the school years 2016 and 2017, studies showed that nearly 1 in 5 special education teachers left the classroom. That's affecting 48 out of the 50 states and the District of Columbia. This turnover has very serious consequences because it affected student learning outcomes, but it also impacted the sustainability of special education programs in schools. One of the pressing but probably under-addressed factors behind this attrition is the teacher compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is the emotional exhaustion that results from prolonged exposure to their students' trauma and the high intensity need to support their students. So prior studies have identified burnout in special education teaching as often being the reason for the teacher attrition. So the JDR, or Job Demand Resources Model, focuses on the impact of workload, student behavioral challenges, and lack of planning time on teachers. Additionally, the research has also examined second traumatic stress. Prior research has examined secondary traumatic stress, which is something that is explored in the study too, but it was previously used in the fields of social work and healthcare. Gaps in the research. What is missing is a focused and in-depth exploration of how compassion fatigue specifically influences special education teachers' decision to stay or leave the profession. While the general trends in teacher attrition are well documented, there's very limited qualitative research that captures the lived experiences of special education teachers. So this study fills that gap by exploring the emotional, professional, and psychological dimensions of their decision making. This sets the stage for the rest of the study and underscores why it's both timely and essential. The purpose of the study was to explore how special education teachers experience compassion fatigue and how that affects their decision to continue teaching. There are 3 research questions in the study that focus on identifying the factors contributing to compassion fatigue, its perceived impact, and the supports teachers feel they need to continue in the profession. The literature reference in the study highlights that compassion fatigue, the emotional residue from working with students who experience trauma, is a significant but under-discussed factor in teacher burnout. Several studies have explored job-related stress in special education, but very few have delved deeply into how compassion fatigue plays a role in a teacher's decision to leave or stay in the profession. So this study, my study, is grounded in the compassion fatigue theoretical framework, which I adapted from Charles Figley. It focuses on specifically on the 3 tenets of the framework. It is exposure to suffering, empathic response, and residual compassion stress, which explains how prolonged exposure to students' trauma can lead to secondary traumatic stress and eventually compassion fatigue. This framework helps us understand not just burnout, but its root causes within the specific context of special education. So this study was grounded in the constructivist philosophical worldview, which assumes that individuals develop subjective meanings through their own personal experiences. This approach was appropriate for my goal, which is to explore how special education teachers make sense of compassion fatigue and its role in their decision to stay or leave the profession. I employed the qualitative single case study design, which allowed me to focus deeply on a bounded group, which were special education teachers who had experienced compassion fatigue. So I used this design to help us understand the world through the lens of those living in it. So in the study, the participants' voices were central to this exploration. The case study methodology that I used provided an empirical structure to examine the complex phenomenon in a real world context. So, teaching students with special needs, managing trauma, and navigating emotional exhaustion. I considered variables like prior trauma, support systems, and the intensity of the job demands, specifically focusing on the emotional and physical demands of the job. I chose single case design to allow detailed and multi-layered analysis. My data collection included semi-structured interviews and an open-ended questionnaire. These instruments gave participants space to reflect honestly on their experiences both in the past and the present. Their narratives allowed me to capture not just what happened, but how it felt, how they made sense of it, and how it shaped their decisions. This methodology honored the emotional complexity of the topic. It provided depth, authenticity, and trust, creating space for participants to tell their stories and for me to build a data-rich, experience-centered analysis of this very human experience and challenge. The data analysis in this study involved several coding stages. I began with organizing the data, followed by writing the memos and using descriptive coding for each participant. Then I applied thematic coding across all cases to uncover any patterns in the data. Finally, I used theoretical coding to connect the findings back to the broader framework of compassion fatigue and teacher attrition. My study had 4 participants, which were recruited through convenient sampling, who also met very strict inclusion criteria, such as their current employment in special education at the same school district, and also having identified that they have experience with students exhibiting trauma-related behaviors. So in doing so, this ensured that the insights gathered in my study were highly relevant to the 3 research questions. This study had 4 key findings. First one is regarding the trauma in the classroom. So teachers in the study shared that their daily exposure to their students' trauma behaviors such as aggression, emotional dysregulation, were really consistent trigger for compassion fatigue. These trauma manifestations of their students didn't just disrupt the instruction in the classroom, but it really altered the entire emotional landscape of the classroom. The teachers felt frustrated, they felt helpless, which contributed to their emotional exhaustion. The second key finding is regarding empathic support. So the participants in this study discussed how they took on an unofficial counseling role. They provided a safe space for the students. They really gave them this nurtured experience. While the empathy was rooted in care and trust building, it often really leads to emotional strain in the teachers, especially since most of them said that they didn't have the formal training in trauma response. Some of the teachers also noted that their high emotional sensitivity, which made them effective with their students, also made them more vulnerable in their experience of residual compassion stress. The third key finding is the cost of caring, which is a term that was used by that is used by Charles Figley. This finding speaks to the personal toll of the work. So teachers reported declining well-being, withdrawal from social activities, and even strained family relationships. They described this burden as the cost of caring. Many found themselves pouring so much emotional energy into their students that they had nothing left for home and their families. This supports the idea that while teachers are driven by purpose, the emotional demands of their work can come at the expense of their own personal lives. So the fourth finding is regarding career decisions. So all the 4 participants in the study acknowledged that they had seriously considered leaving the profession, some multiple times. However, they also expressed compassion satisfaction, which is the joy of seeing students progress, and the emotional rewards of helping their students feel safe or successful. This duality was powerful. On hard days, teachers wanted out. On meaningful days, they couldn't imagine doing anything else. Findings in the study align closely with existing literature on the relationship between compassion fatigue and trauma exposure. The lived experiences of the teachers in the study validated prior research. The findings also expanded on it by emphasizing that development of compassion fatigue is an element of teacher burnout, which often leads to attrition. So, implications and recommendations for district leaders. There is a need for more trauma-informed professional development to help support their teachers. Access to professional counseling. Our educators need mental health support to help them deal and manage the crisis that they experience. Then, with school site administrators, we need administrators to provide opportunities for peer collaboration. We want administrators to be more visible and for them to know what's happening in the classrooms. And then for researchers, to really focus on what's motivating special education teachers to stay in the classroom. So instead of just focusing on why they're leaving, let's think about why they're staying and how we can implement that so that we can address the teacher attrition. There are 3 limitations in this study. One is on participant demographics. I felt that because there was only 1 male and 3 females in this study, it really limited the gender diversity. The next is the timing of the data collection. This was conducted at the start of the school year when the stress levels may be lower, possibly influencing responses. And the third is research positionality. So my dual role as a researcher and a district employee might have introduced bias despite efforts to ensure confidentiality. Distribution plan. The results of the study will be disseminated through educational leadership forums, academic publications, and professional development workshops. My goal is to ensure that these insights inform both policy and practice at the school, district, and possibly state levels. So, special education teachers play a vital role in serving some of our most vulnerable students. If we fail to support their emotional well-being, we risk losing them and ultimately undermining the very system meant to protect and uplift our students with special needs. By bringing compassion fatigue to the forefront, this study contributes to a better understanding of how teacher attrition offers offer actionable pathways for retention. Finally, this study was supported by previous scholarly research as reference in the next 3 slides.